Hi everyone, I'm Ricardo Gonçalves. Welcome to Ricardo&Reddie, where we are giving you inspiring and uplifting stories during lockdown. Mark, how has your week been?
My week's been pretty good. It's just been the same old week, really. Exciting news that we can soon have gatherings of 5 people outside in the park, maybe a
That's in
picnic
Sydney.
if you're vaccinated. And speaking of vaccination, I went out and got my vaccination yesterday at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney, and there it is. I was really, really nervous walking in because it feels like you're in some sort of future movie. You know, you walk through this weird car park, there's a million different checks, and then into this old auditorium where you sort of sit there. And a friend of mine who got vaccinated recently said that they play this weird music, this calming music when he was there. There was no music when I was there. It was just dead silent. And then yeah, got vaccinated. It was really easy. Walked out and I felt really good. I felt like, I felt freer, which sounds really weird, but in a sense, because it's one step and then the next one, and then hopefully eventually we open up.
It feels like one step closer to the end of the pandemic and that you're playing your part, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I did wake up though throughout the night, just kind of hot and cold a little bit, but I was fine. And then I woke up this morning, I just felt really tired, like I hadn't slept in a year, but I'm fine now. So yeah.
Mark, I do have a question though. So when you woke up that day to get your vaccine, what made you think, I'm going to wear this muscle top to get my shot?
You congratulated me and now you cut me down. The reason I wore the muscle top, if we're going to call it that, is because they said wear loose clothing. So I actually had a windbreaker over the top, and it was easy just to take off the windbreaker and boom, jabs in arms.
Right. Looks good in the photo too, doesn't it?
It did. I mean, it's a nice photo actually. They have great lighting and RPA. So yeah.
So I got my vaccination, my second vaccination a few weeks ago, and I had a good experience with that. I was totally fine. But for me this week, Mark, as you know, I had very minor surgery, nothing major. But the interesting thing is that I had to go under general for it. And it's funny the things you remember, because I remember so clearly the nurse kind of talking to you as you're about to wake up, right? And so the nurse is talking.
And what did you say when you
The
woke
nurse
up?
is talking, and the nurse says, Ricardo, are you okay? Are you waking up? Or whatever it was. And I remember looking at the nurse going, I had such a nice dream about Ariana Grande.
What did she say?
I can't remember. All I remember is, and then after that moment, I went, did I just say that? And it's such a random thing. Anyway, that's what we did this week. We've got another piece of news also. We've had some great feedback about the interviews we've been doing over the past 6 to 7 weeks, Mark. Already, we've done 7 weeks worth of shows. We're now on Spotify. So each of those individual interviews are now on Spotify. If you want to listen on the road, just search for Ricardo&Reddie on Spotify.
And also, if you do want to join the conversation today, remember, follow the Ricardo&Reddie Facebook page. You can like the page, make sure you share some of the interviews on there with friends or family, and also bring questions and any ideas of people who you think we should be talking to. We are looking for inspiring stories in lockdown. So, it can be something serious, but, that does also lift the mood as well, because tell you what, this doesn't do the trick anymore.
Well, we've got some great stories today. Later in the show, we've got some tips from an energist about how to boost our energy during lockdown. But our first guests, they're a bunch of small business owners in Melbourne. It's a great story, and they create inclusive fashion. And it's timely, given that we're in the middle or the beginning of the Paralympics in Tokyo. And these 2 women have designed a range of clothes with the disabled in mind, while also keeping it fashion forward. So before we bring them on, here's a quick video about what they're about.
Hi, I'm Molly. And I'm Emma, and we're the co-founders of Jam the Label. So Jam's an adaptive clothing brand for young people with disabilities who want to get dressed that little bit easier but still looking and feeling funky. So we're 2 full-time occupational therapists, but we also used to work as disability support workers, and it was at these jobs that we met Jack and Maddie. So I met Jack about 3 or 4 years ago, and for a while there I was working with him 6 days a week, helping him get dressed in the morning, and it was sort of there where I felt like I got a little insight into the experiences that families have each day, and it is really tricky and really time consuming. Yeah, and I know Molly and I would come together after working with Jack and Maddie and be like, this is such a difficulty, this shouldn't be an issue, why is there not something out there that just makes it so much easier? It's also really important to us that through this brand, if we can just make individuals like Jack and Maddie and their families' lives just that little bit easier through saving 5 minutes in the day or giving them that dignity they deserve, that is the overall aim of Jam, and we would have accomplished what we set out to do.
Molly Rogers and Emma Clegg joins us now live from Melbourne. Guys, what a great story. And the first question, you mentioned it in that video, why hasn't anyone really done this sort of a thing? Why do you think that is? Emma?
Yeah, it's really, we couldn't believe it when we first sort of had the idea for Jam. Obviously, we don't have the fashion background or even really the business background. We come at it from the functional side of things. And we kind of looked at each other and thought, surely this must exist. Surely we can't be the first ones to sort of think of this sort of adaptive clothing idea. And when we looked into it, we realized that companies overseas like Tommy Hilfiger, and Marks and Spencer in England, they started to do these adaptive ranges, but wasn't done really well in Australia at that stage. And what was available wasn't made for this sort of younger age group and wasn't products that we would have wanted to wear when we were teenagers or would want to wear now, which I think there's a lot of different reasons why that was the case, but it's definitely getting a lot better now, especially in the last few weeks with the Iconic launching their adaptive range. It's definitely becoming more in the mainstream to have these sort of inclusive brands.
Molly, what is the reasoning behind the name Jam?
Yeah, so you would have just seen in the footage Jack and Maddie. So they were two people that Emma and I worked with Jack and Emma worked with Maddie whilst we were at uni studying occupational therapy. We worked as disability support workers. And so they were the Jam. And we felt it was super important when naming Jam that we didn't want it to be very disability specific, and we didn't want it to really focus on that side. We wanted it to be a quippy name that was, memorable and short, but also was more fashion than disability focused. And they're the why. Jack and Maddie are the why we do it. So why not name it after them?
Before we talk about the actual clothing and what makes them different, as disability carers, right? What did you learn about the needs of young people with disability? Emma?
Yeah, there was heaps that we learned. I mean, our first product that we ever made was a jacket specifically designed for wheelchair users. And that was really brought about because of our experiences with Jack and Maddie. Molly and I used to come together at uni all the time and be like, I went for a walk with Maddie yesterday, and typical Melbourne weather, it started to rain and I couldn't get a jacket on her quick enough while she was seated in her wheelchair. And so we both had these conversations over and over again of these really sort of degrading situations where, Jack and Maddie didn't have access to fashion like we did that was easy to put on or comfortable for them to wear while still looking age appropriate and funky. And so... Sorry,
how much input have the boys had in helping you develop those ideas?
Yeah, so with the jacket in particular, Jack was our first ever sample. We tried it on him and got some feedback from him and his mum to do with that. And for all of our products, we really focus on having people with lived experience having input on that. So the jacket was, very much focused on Jack and Maddie and their experiences. And from there, that was more of an adaptive product. So that was for wheelchair users specifically. But as we've grown as a brand, we've moved into now that inclusive fashion space. So that's sort of more universal design, which means it benefits everyone. So the shirt that I'm wearing right now is our linen shirt, and it's got magnets instead of buttons. So they do up super easily. But it's super easy for people with sort of fine motor difficulties, but also anyone. Saves so much time.
We're already getting some great feedback. I mean, Matt Doyle sent a message saying, as a disability advocate and someone with a disability, thank you. So obviously you found a market or a marketing need there. It's people with a desire for a product. When I emailed you earlier and I said, tell me something about one of your main products, and you were talking about your pants. So can you tell us about the pant?
Yeah, sure. So we have, as you can see there, 2 different styles of pants. So we have the Chinos, which again just look like any other pair of Chinos. However, they have side access. So as you can see there, they have an invisible zip and a little snap button at the top. And what that means is that for people that wear continence aids or need assistance getting dressed lying down in particular, it gives better access without having to struggle with pulling down the pants all the way or getting them all the way up. And similarly, you can see with our high-waisted pants on the right there, those buttons, although they just look like a design feature, they're actually functional and again work like the Chino pants in that they open up to provide side access, which is something that a lot of people that wear continence aids or get assistance with dressing require.
Molly, can you tell us a bit about the team behind Jam? Because I always find it really interesting when someone starts a business. You guys were occupational therapists, and now you're going into fashion. It's completely foreign. It's like me being a journalist going into finance. So tell us about the transition and the team behind the brand.
Yeah, so it's just Emma and I still at the moment, and it certainly has been a really, really steep learning curve into, like you said, everything. The side that we're so comfortable with is the functional side of the clothing. So the business, the finance, the marketing, the fashion was all totally new to us. And I think something that we both speak about all the time is how fortunate we are that we've had such a good network around us. So we've had people that we could ask little bits and pieces of the whole way through. And for the fashion side, that's obviously quite an integral part of the business. So we've connected with a lady called Katrina at A Fitting Connection, and she helps fashion startups. So she's been super, super helpful for us. We'll come and say, okay, these are the functions we need from the items. This is the design we want. And she'll say, okay, that's not possible. This can be, here's the material that'll work. Or she's been really, really helpful.
And that's great. As I do a lot of stories on small business owners, and we often say that you do what you do know well, and you do that well, and any help that you need, you outsource that, you ask for help. So how do you actually make it? Where's the clothes made, and what's the process that you went through with that?
Yeah, so at the moment, all our products are manufactured offshore through a combination of different countries. And as Molly said, we sort of start the process by sitting down and having a discussion and getting feedback from our community and those with lived experience about what dressing needs exist and what kind of products they're looking for. Molly and I sit down and go through sort of the design process of what we think will work and what we think will look really good. And then we go to Katrina and have further discussions about what kind of fabric she thinks will work and trims. And then we just go back and forth between our manufacturers offshore with samples and sort of, fitting sessions and all that kind of stuff to see what will work, but what also looks really good.
And what input do the boys still have in this process? Are they still very much involved? I'm sure they're really taken back by being full-time models as well now.
Yeah. So we get Jack and Maddie are both non-verbal, but they do have input, but their families have also been very much integral and had a lot of input and lots of input into the designs. We're working on a new design for an item at the moment, and I took it around to Jack's house a couple of weekends ago, and we talked through different things and tried it on him. And they're still definitely involved in the process.
What do the families say when they see these products, and how does it physically help them?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the nicest part of the whole business for us is when we get this feedback from, Jack and Maddie's families, but also other families. We recently had a little booth at an expo, and we had return customers come up to us and say, oh, we wear your jacket every day, or we use your tote bag. And I think that is the biggest compliment we can receive. But sort of from a functional point of view, a lot of the thing is getting that time back that's wasted spending so long on dressing in the mornings or at night that they could be spent doing much more enjoyable things.
Molly, are you hoping this trend catches on with other brands, like you say, Tommy Hilfiger, but would you be calling on other Australian brands to do the same? I mean, the one thing that strikes me is just moving, the fly of a pair of pants or the opening to the side, and really it makes no difference to anyone having that there. So it's a really nice way of doing that. So would you be asking brands to think about this?
Definitely, exactly. And that's something that Emma and I talk about so often, is the fact that what we do is not rocket science. It's tiny changes that make things better for everyone. Like, one thing we do is we have no tags on any of our products. We do print on labels. And that's something that every single fashion brand could be doing, that just makes it more comfortable and functional for people with sensory differences, but just everyone who finds tags really itchy and annoying. And I think that's the thing that Emma and I talk about all the time, is that it's so easy to be inclusive, but it just takes that little bit of extra thought, or asking the question of people with lived experience, to include the 1 in 5 people in Australia that identify as having a disability.
What I also love about the inclusivity part of it and part of the business is that you didn't just think about it with the clothing, you've thought about it with the website as well, right? What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so that was really important for us as well, to, to say we're an inclusive brand, we need to be inclusive in more than just our product design. So through our website, you'll notice that there's a little feature that you can click on that provides different accessibility features. So for instance, increasing contrast, increasing text size for those with vision impairment. And then on the same respect with our social media accounts, we make sure we're as inclusive and accessible as possible. So providing things like image descriptions on all our posts are a really important part of our brand.
We have a good question now from Lara Hyams. She says, I love these ideas. Tommy Hilfiger did his collection because of his children who needed it. Should brands be doing this without having a personal connection?
Yes, absolutely. And I think not only from the fact that you'll be changing people's lives, I think it's a really good business move as well. There's 1 in 5 people in Australia, like we said, that can be your future customer, or could be a potential money spender or purchaser, that are missing out because you're not including them. So I think that Emma and I was talking about the fact that that's such a good business move as well for other brands.
And the NDIS, how does that play in?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting aspect of inclusive clothing in Australia specifically. So with the NDIS, anyone with a disability under the age of 65 has access to this individual funding from the government to help them with their supports that they require. And part of that is low-cost assistive technology, which our clothing classifies as. So you can actually use that part of your funding, if you have access to it, on our products, which is a really great thing that exists.
Well, guys, I think that's such a wonderful idea, and I hope it does really well. I'm not sure if I told you, but the way I found out about you both, Molly and Emma, was that I got the email from The Iconic and I saw your little description there. How important is being involved with The Iconic, given that you are still a relatively new and small business?
Yeah, that was huge for us. And I think that's been a massive goal of ours from the start. Being represented as a mainstream brand or on a mainstream platform like that is huge for inclusive fashion, but also for us. Yeah, I think we dreamed about it and thought we would one day want to do it. But I think it's, blown us away that it happened really quite relatively quickly. And it's just massive to be able to, that someone might accidentally purchase one of our items, and then someone with a disability who's purchased going down the street and sort of seeing each other in a jam top would just be very cool.
Before we
here's
go,
your
if there are people that do want to reach out to you both, we have a few people who are interested. How can they do that?
Yeah, sure. So they can find us on our socials at Jam the Label, or they can send us an email, hello@jamthelabel.com.
Perfect.
Emma and Molly, thank you so much. Good luck with the venture, and thank you for your time on Ricardo and Reddie.
Thanks, you.
Guys.
Thanks for having us.
See you later. Bye.
Thanks.
Well, that was great.
Still have Molly. Okay, she's gone now. Yeah, they were great. They were really interesting. I didn't actually know that Tommy Hilfiger had children who were living with a disability. So that's an interesting fact from Lara. So thank you, Lara.
And that's the other thing too. Often, not just with a business idea, but even when you want to take part in or volunteer for a charity, you kind of wonder, what's the idea? How am I going to do it? Do I need to wait for a personal connection before I start doing it? So that was a good question from Lara about whether or not, you kind of need to wait for some sort of a connection before you do it. But 1 in 5 people in Australia has a disability, and I guess that you don't always see that disability, do you?
No, exactly. And like Mia was saying, I guess we had on a few weeks ago, perception is one thing, but you don't always see these things. So, really good initiative by them. Our next guest is a man who calls himself an energist. I don't know what that is, but he's about to join us now. Sean Hall, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks so much. I'll make sure I let you know what that is.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get to that, but I want to ask you firstly, you becoming an energist, I understand, began with a breakdown in the menswear section of David Jones. Now, I understand, I get it, it's hectic in there, but tell us about that first.
Yeah, so it wasn't about the fashion that day. I was in a senior executive role at one of Australia's biggest companies, and I was running a transformation program for about 16 million customers, and I was just doing crazy hours basically, and it got to a point where one day I found myself in the fancy men's accessories department of David Jones, and that was unusual for me for a couple of reasons, because I don't actually buy $1,000 man bags. I don't even like to wear sleeves, as you can tell. But the other reason that was unusual is that day I actually had no idea how I got there. If another customer had seen me, they would have thought I looked a bit dazed and confused. But I was feeling all sorts of sort of crazy, sweating. My mind was racing. I was physically shaking. And I've actually come to call that experience an energy crisis. And the reason I call it that is that when I was looking for resources to help me get out of that situation, essentially everything around men's mental health really focused on the extremes around suicide, depression, anxiety, addiction. And I didn't feel like I had any of those things. I just had nothing left in my tank, just completely depleted. And so, this is why I guess I focus more on that preventative side of things around burnout and an energy crisis before people need that professional help.
Sean, how do you identify if it's an energy crisis as opposed to something more serious?
Yeah, so there's a number of different warning signs that we look for. We assess every single person that we work with. We've developed this energy intelligence assessment, which is endorsed by the University of Sydney. And essentially, it's a collection of little things. So all the psychologists will tell us, first of all, that sleep disturbance is one of the most early warning signs of vulnerability to mental health issues. But we don't value sleep, right? Well, let's just let it go on for years, sometimes being sleep deprived. It can be signs like things that don't normally get under your skin suddenly really irk you. Your ability to regulate your emotions is really diminished. It could be your inner critic just beating you up over and over again and being really, really loud and vicious, more than it normally would. So there's lots of these little signs, and we actually track 13 of them to identify a person's personal vulnerability to that burnout.
So in just a few words, just to be really clear, what is an energist?
So an energist, very simply, is a person that expands their energy and then the energy of others. And so when you think about it, you've sort of a choice is either to be an energist or an energy vampire. That's the way I look at things. And so a lot of us don't want to be energy vampires. I'm sure none of us would get invited to parties if we were. But essentially, it's just really that idea of focusing on self-care first and building your own energy, making energist decisions, which are things that build you up, fill up your cup, versus energy vampire decisions, which deplete you.
And you've now made this your business, right? But before we get to what you're doing, and we'll get a masterclass at the end of this interview, so Sean will give us a few minutes and some tips on how to boost our energy. What's your background in this?
Well, I sort of say that this is my 5th career, and everything that I've done before is sort of wrapped up in this. I started in fitness, which was part of the irony, I guess, in my energy crisis. I knew a lot about the physical aspects of well-being and not so much around the other aspects. I can't believe you pulled that one out. There you go. So five DVDs. Yeah, I'm on 5 DVDs with Michelle Bridges back in the day. I knew a lot about about that. And then I guess I've combined my background in marketing and HR and leadership and technology and really combined all that into this. And I guess what I'm trying to do is pay forward my my privilege in many ways, because I have had amazing access through my career to life coaches, to psychotherapy, to academics and researchers, to leadership development. And all of those things I realize that a lot of people don't get access to. And so we just pay forward everything that we've had that privilege of learning.
Sean, I want to ask you, this idea of success, which you talk about, part of me feels like this idea is ingrained at us at school to get a really high-flying job, to work really hard, to not sleep, to keep going, to be the best, to earn the most. Sometimes, and I felt this recently, I've worked really hard to get to where I am, but I'm now enjoying just coasting. And I feel like that's okay. I don't need to justify it. I don't need to have a new ambition. Is that okay?
A million percent. Like I totally recommend that. I think there's a dominant narrative too, especially for young people, that they all need to be out there saving the world, right? And I'm just like, if you can focus on your world, if you can feel successful in your world and make it really small to start with, and just know that you're being an energist and having a positive energy impact on the people around you, then that fills you up. And then you can consciously decide, just like you have, whether you choose to make your world a bit bigger or go for that next role, whatever it might be. But I totally subscribe to that myself. I just think there's so much focus on the sort of going up, up, up. And I would just love to see people focus more on actually their impact going out, you know, and actually looking at how they positively impact the people around them.
Sean, you can send Mark the invoice for that free piece of advice there. We've got some questions. They might cross over with part of your masterclass a bit later, but I'll call them up anyway. Chris asks, do you have any tips on how to boost your energy when you're having a stressful day and your tank is running low?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things to focus on is what I call bookends. So every thing that we do basically in our diaries has a start and a finish. And so if you can make sure that your start of that is energizing and your finish of that is energizing or recharging, that's really important. Now, most of us don't feel like we have a lot of control generally over what's in our days, but we do have a lot of control about how we start and end our days. And so I start at the edges. So focus there. Am I starting my day in a way that sets the tone, that energizes me? You know, am I finishing the day by making sure I'm recharged and relaxed and having a good night's sleep? And then once you have that in place, you can start to move inwards. What sort of we're hearing here, right, is another example of energy vampires in a way that turn up. And what I often find is you might look at your day and you'll find that you've got a day back-to-back energy vampires, right? Which is so normal in the corporate world. And what I say is when you've got back...
as well, are they oxygen thieves as well?
Totally suck it out of you, right? And what I say, when we have back-to-back energy vampires, you end up practicing what I call winefulness instead of mindfulness, just to cope with that, right? So my advice is always start at the edges, right, and work your way in. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself in those moments at the start of the day and the end of the day.
If you're having a terrible time in your career, which you were, which triggered this new movement, would some advice be to people to look in other areas of their lives, like focusing on exercise or taking an art class or learning how to cook or, you know, focusing outside the career? Because I feel like so many people are obsessed with just doing well in the career and it's all defining, which I feel like for me, it's changed. I was like that. And the career is just a facet of my life. Is that something you would recommend? Totally. I think that we need to be sure that we're finding meaning in lots of different parts of our lives. If we're only getting meaning and we're putting a lot of people, I guess, have their whole identity around their career as well. And that's not very healthy for us either. So if we can make sure, as you said, we're creating space for these other things which energize us, right, and not putting everything into your hair. I think one of the things I do want to say too about my energy crisis is I actually love my job too much, right? And I was a perfectionist. I was a yes guy. I didn't know how to ask for help. You know, I had there's not many roles that you get where you can impact 16 million people, right? And so I just put everything I had into it. And that was essentially part of this as well.
Sean, before we get to the masterclass, obviously this is your business. We are in much of the country's in lockdown. We're not back in a normal environment where you can go to corporates and be in their offices and in boardrooms to deliver these types of talks. What kind of demand is there right now for your type of services?
Look, what I'm noticing out there is there's real fatigue about talking about mental health. Right. And I think we've got layers and layers and layers of fatigue that we've been going through over the last 18 months. And people want positive, optimistic, hopeful conversations. And I think that's what people are really resonating with the work that Energy X does, is that we're not looking for problems. We're looking at what's great in you. We take a positive psychology and neuroscience-based approach, and we build on those strengths to actually find that extra energy that you need versus looking for a problem. I also think what people respond to is that because I come from a position of lived experience, right? I've had access to all of these people that have helped me get to be my best, but there's no hierarchy as well. And often what we'll find is that if you invite a doctor or a psychologist into a room, sometimes it actually increases the stress in people. Whereas if they can see someone and go, hey, that guy felt like I do now, and he's managed to sort himself out, like people resonate with that.
We have a great question from Marco. How about on these long Zoom calls? How can we keep focused meeting after meeting?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Zoom calls, right, is what's going on and why it's so exhausting for us is there's a cognitive dissonance going on. So we're trying to convince ourselves that we're in a room and we're connecting with these people, but our body actually knows that we're not. And that's exhausting for us over and over again. And we're doing back-to-back-to-back video calls. And so this is where it's really important to start thinking about boundaries, and choosing to say, well, actually for this one, I'm going to have a certain, I'm going to have my camera off, for instance, right? Or one of my favorite things I like to recommend to people is without a doubt, you'll have one meeting or one conversation that you can have every day that you can do while you're moving, right? Even if that's just walking around the house, cleaning up and doing the housework, or actually outside getting some fresh air at the same time. So really plan for that. Right. So we're often on default mode, accepting all of these things, but take a little bit more responsibility, pause before you say yes to a Zoom call and say, could this just be, a normal voice call?
Sean, I hope you don't mind. We are getting quite a few questions coming through. If you don't mind answering them, I think people are really keen. And if you do have any questions, you can just write it in the comments section of the Facebook video that you're watching right now. Milan asks, can you speak to the crossover between your work, that of a life coach, and or a counselor psychologist? Yeah,
that's a really great question, Milan. So I see myself I see Energy X essentially as a gateway to deeper expertise, right? So coming back to that idea of paying things forward, what I found is that the topic of well-being is overwhelming just to start with, right? You just think about nutrition. It's like, where should I start? Should I be keto, paleo, vegan? It's just overwhelming. And so what we do is we help people find the first place to start, right? And what that might mean is that people then become curious about the need, for deeper professional help, for instance, or we might be able to help them become more aware of that might be something that they should be considering. But our goal is essentially to both complement and have people value those types of professionals even more than they do now.
Okay, Sean, I think we're time for your masterclass. From my understanding, it's 3 things to boost our energy right now. Take us through it.
Yeah, so I'm hoping I'm going to be a little bit cheeky, and I'm actually going to say 5 things, but they're going to be really quick. So the first thing is to focus on what you can control. There's only 3 things you can control. The first is taking responsibility for your energy. The second is taking responsibility for your energy impact on others. And the third is for taking responsibility for just being really good at what you do, right? So start there, just focus on what you can control. The second thing is to think about the decisions that you're making. Are they energist decisions or energy vampire decisions? So an energy vampire decision is choosing not to get enough sleep, choosing to, pig out on junk food every day, choosing not to move, right? That's an energy vampire decision. So choose the opposite, choose to be an energist, right? That's the simplest thing that we can do every day. The third thing is boundaries, right? We need boundaries. Our work-life balance has just been completely disrupted. And so really thinking about the boundaries that you've got set up for you around email, around access to yourself, around definitely around social media. I would love to see people take control back of their algorithms right now. Unfollow anybody that is an energy vampire that makes you feel bad about yourself or has you comparing yourself in some way, right? Get rid of those people. The fourth thing I'm going to say is get into rhythm, which starts with sleep, right? The sleep science tells us just go to bed at the same time every night, and it will greatly improve both the quantity and quality of your sleep. Just start there, right? We're supposed to be in rhythm. Sleep is one of those things. And the very last thing I want to give you is a simple strategy to boost your happy hormones every day. Now, there's 4 happy hormones. They're called dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So I hope you've got a pen or a paper or something like that right now, because I want you to write down these letters. So write down C-A-L-M, so calm, right? So this is the thing. So to boost your happy hormones, we create a calm plan, which is going to give you your dopamine. C is for connect. Choose somebody that you can have a great conversation with, a meaningful conversation with each day, right? Plan for that. That is going to give you a boost of oxytocin. Then A is for act. There's 2 acts I'd like you to consider. The first one is just to think about eating healthy, right? Choose a meal that day or try to focus on getting the 6 servings of vegetables that you need. Just start there. Just eat more veggies is a great way to boost your nutrition and impact your gut health. L is for laugh, right? A big belly laugh is going to give you a boost of endorphins, right? And make you feel good, right? So choose something that's going to make you laugh. And the final letter is M, which is for move, right? So find a way to move. As I said, a great way to do that is just to choose a conversation that you can have that day while you're moving. Now, that also gives you your endorphins, right? So dose of those happy hormones just by creating a calm plan each day.
I think I've done pretty well with calm. I'll be honest. I think I've ticked a lot of those boxes, although sleeping is so hard. It's like I need a parent to just be like, go to bed, go to sleep. Yeah.
Do you know what's interesting though? You mentioned, you're talking about energy vampires. What's the balance, do you reckon, when you have mates or acquaintances that you do want to support and help, but when they can suck the energy out of you?
Yeah.
So what's the balance between, hanging out with them for support and then looking after yourself?
Yeah. So this is something that we need to gauge, right? And this comes back to boundaries. It's really, really important to be able to know, right? So if you know that, so if you still want to be there and support people, do something energizing before and energizing afterwards, right? As the basic to start with, right? If you know that you really need to be with someone that's a bit down, then I would say do that, right? To actually fill up your tank to be able to deal with that situation in the first place. And then the second thing I think is just be a role model with this stuff, first of all, right? Try these things, look after yourself first, and let your good behavior rub off on the people around you. That's it, because we can't change other people, right? As much as we'd love to, it's hard enough to change ourselves sometimes, but we can't change other people. So just focus on you first, being a good role model for yourself, making sure that you've got enough to be able to handle people that might be sucking a little bit of life out of you. One little thing I will say on energy vampires is what I believe is no one actually wants to be one, right? Because if someone told you were an energy vampire, you'd be horrified, right? And so I believe that inherently all humans want to be energists. We all want to be giving the good vibes out to the people we care about the most, right? We all want to have a positive impact. And so if someone has been an energy vampire, it's not because they want to be, it's other stuff that's going on. It's not about you.
You have a very calming voice, Sean. That would also play. It's very calming.
Before we let you go, can I ask just one more business-related question? Because obviously now, I think Brisbane's not locked down like most other parts of the country. But do you miss being in those corporate boardrooms? And on top of that, the second part of the question, given that there are quite a few people doing similar types of things in terms of, I know you're more specific, but in terms of motivational speaking, what makes you different, especially when you do it online?
So I think, actually, the banner on my website says the last thing anybody needs right now is a boring webinar, right? So the way that I design things, first of all, is everything is from a data-led perspective. So we assess you to know where you're at versus where you want to be. So everything, even if it's just an hour-long masterclass, is bespoke essentially to the people attending. And I think that's really important, that people have their own personal context, and it's not just something that's generic and pulled off a shelf. So that's really important. The second thing, I guess, is my background and everything from, jumping around in Lycra to being a marketer and things like that means that, I really have a big focus on making my experiences. That wasn't a cue to put it up again. I'm making my experiences, fun and engaging and not passive. Like, they're designed to be interactive, right? And then the final thing is just coming back, I guess, to this idea around conversations, is that everything that we do is designed to help people have more meaningful self-care conversations with each other, because there's only so many times you can say, how are you? Right. And so what we need to do is give people a shared language around these conversations so they feel confident both to look after themselves, but to look after each other as well.
That's great, Sean. Thank you so much for that. It's super interesting.
And anyone that wants to get in touch, the website is www.energyx. So that's energx.com.au. Yep. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks so much, guys. Sean.
See you later.
Yeah.
I felt like I learned
now as it is.
Well, it's not. Well, it's what, 8:15.
I've also been having espresso martinis, so maybe that's helped. That was really interesting. Calm.
Yeah.
That down.
And there's a lot of there was a lot of great feedback in there. I've got to listen back to it because I was pressing so many buttons, but I'm thinking, oh, that was a good point, and I'm like, I've got to listen to it back again. But the whole energy vampire and keeping your energy up. I think we're both similar personalities, Mark, where we're both on the go all the time. I think we almost need the opposite. Like, we need to learn how to slow down a bit. Well, I do anyway. I can't speak.
Say no. Say no. I'm a yes man. I say yes to everything and everyone.
Yeah.
I'm a yes man. But I think I thought the interesting thing was the whole, because I see so many people invest so much into their career. It's the first thing people ask about when you go out, and it's like, it's so boring. It's one facet. And I feel like people really should take note of that there are multiple facets and it's not just what you do.
And Sean was also mentioning that difference between whether you're having a life crisis or whether it's just a depletion of energy. But of course, if you are having a life crisis, remember, you can always contact Lifeline at any time at 13 11 14. So that's Lifeline 13 11 14. That's it.
That's it. Thank you.
Remember, facebook.com/Ricardo&Reddie. Tell your friends. If you like this video, make sure you tell them. I actually said to Mark earlier today, we should encourage people to like the video and share it amongst their friends. And he said, oh, no, you rolled your eyes. And he said, oh, don't do it. It sounds a bit desperate.
It does. It sounds like, hey, it's like when people go on Instagram, they're like, follow for follow and all that stuff, and you unfollow them, then they follow you, and it's like, what is this? But people will share it if they like it, right?
Yeah, but you've got to remind them. Lauren's saying great one again. Lauren, thank you for your support with the show.
Make sure you share it.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.